Honestly, forget about cutting dovetails by hand unless you enjoy the process. I love to use my bandsaw to cut them, and all it requires is 2 simple jigs to make. One is a horizontal wedge, the other one is a vertical wedge. So I'm going to show you how to make those right now. For the horizontal wedge, all you need is something stable, plywood, MDF, something like that. See, dovetails are expressed in a ratio. Ratios like 1:6 and 1:8. And what that means is that for every 1 inch you're moving over, you are going forward, whatever the other number is. And of course, you can take that out however you want to do it. You could figure it out based in centimeters if you wanted, 1 centimeter to 6 centimeters, 1 centimeter to 8 centimeters, any of that kind of stuff. First thing I am going to do is make myself a mark at 1 inch. From the next thing we're going to do is we are going to go 6 inches up. And then the next thing that we do is we are just going to take a ruler and we are going to tell it that in this 6-inch span, we are going from this width to that width. So we'll go into the corner, line up on area that those 2 lines cross each other, and strike a line all the way across for however long you want this jig to be. Just any kind of offcut, the main thing is just needs to be straight, something that we can butt a piece up against. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line it up, make sure that it's back from your edge here so it doesn't interrupt anything. And I'm just going to put a couple brads in. That's the first part of the jig. It is done now and ready to be used. But of course our material's not ready to be used. So as in any time that we're using lumber, we need to make sure that it's been milled down flat. Have to make sure that all of our edges are square, that we're cut down to size, and then we can go ahead and do the first part of making these dovetails. With all the parts cut down to size, it was time to mark out the dovetails and score the baseline, which is really a quite simple process that you can find instructions on pretty much anywhere if you want to know how. That's not the purpose of this video though, so I'm just going to skip on by that. So this is an R&D Bandsaw's Tough Tooth 1/4 inch 14 TPI blade. And the reason for that is the more teeth that I can have cutting through this thin material in this way, the smoother the cut's going to be, the nicer the dovetail is going to come together. So let's take that jig that we made and we're going to come over here to the bandsaw and I'll show you what we're doing. So here I have my 1 tail piece that I have already marked out. You don't need to mark out any of the other ones, just this 1 piece. I've made my score lines very, very clear. Take this like this so that it's cutting on the outside of my line in the waist, and then we're ready to cut. Something important to keep in mind here is we want to keep the fence in this position and do all of our different cuts that we need on all the different parts. That means we're going to flip the board over in between our cuts and then do all of the other cuts like this before we move the fence. So you can see me here, I'm just flipping this board side to side, end over end, grabbing all of my parts and making the same cut. And then once that one is done, I realign the fence and do the same thing all the way down. That's why you only need to mark 1 of the boards. If you're moving the fence all over the place, you're adding inconsistency, potential for error, and it's going to take a lot longer. Then you can go ahead and set up to cut the shoulders and get those perfectly on the line or leave a little bit of room and fix it with a chisel. At this point, we've got perfectly straight, perfectly on the line cuts on our shoulders here and our tails. Honestly, super smooth with that blade. I think even if I was using a saw, anything but a chisel or a plane isn't really going to leave any better finish than that. So now we've got these in-between pieces, the pin material that we need to remove from in between. And for this, you've got a number of options. If you want to carry on with the bandsaw, I have before just kind of carefully taken little chips out of it at the bandsaw. that works. If you want to use a coping or a fret saw, you're welcome to do that. For me, I have had good success just using a chisel. If you don't have chisels or don't trust your chisels, just stay on the bandsaw and you'll be able to do this as well. I guess technically you could use a jigsaw too. I just don't think that's a very good choice. I just have things against jigsaws. They don't cut straight for me. Once we've done that, we're going to jump over to our pins. With this jig done and those dovetails cut, we could absolutely stop there and you could do the rest as if you were doing normal dovetails, but then you still need the handsaw, and I don't like that. I'm not very good with a handsaw, and I just find that I'm not accurate and it takes so long. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this and we're going to create the other piece. Now to do that, what we're going to do, we're just going to grab the angle off of here using an angle finder or an angle gauge, and then we are going to set our table saw or our miter gauge to that angle, and we're just going to make a couple of wedges that will sit down between two pieces of wood, and that's actually going to give us exactly what we need for the next step. Going to figure out our angle here, and that angle is 80.3 degrees. I have a really accurate miter gauge, and so I'm just gonna go off of the scale on here and then double check with my angle finder. Another way to do it, if you've just got a stock one without any of the angle measurements, just bring your fence on over and adjust it based on your fence with that angle finder in position. Here, tighten that down, and then double check. I found the easiest way to create the wedge pieces accurately that I wanted was to actually make an angled cut at each end of this board, and once I had done that, to reset the miter gauge to 90 degrees or 0 degrees depending on how yours reads, and then I could use the fence and a spacer block for safety to go ahead and set a consistent spacing. We need consistency here. That worked really well and really doesn't require any kind of crazy tool set to be able to accomplish that. Here's a question I have for all of you. What's your experience with making dovetails? Have you ever tried anything like this before? Do you have a favorite method or a least favorite method? I would love to get a discussion going in the comments, so leave your comment with what you think down below. Hey, the next part is pretty simple. You're going to want some sort of fence that sits at a 90-degree angle and is nice and straight. The reason for that is of everything that we're doing. I'm just going to put this together with CA or super glue. It seems to work pretty well for me. If you prefer, you can definitely do it with something a little bit more permanent. Use some wood glue, use a combination of CA and wood glue, but the way that I figure it is if something goes wrong with this jig, can always make a new one anyways. That way as well, you can be sure that the angle be coming in the same here. Just like that. Get this one. And again, making sure that everything is nice and square. There's no gaps anywhere. And I'll press that down. We will apply our CA glue to both this time.
When we do this, we just want to make sure that everything is butted up nice and tight against this fence and pressed down evenly. We do not want our angles to be off, because this here is setting how everything is going to work together. There we go. This one here is also ready to go.
Now let's show you how I use this to cut my pins. Not shown here is the process of transferring the tails over to the pins. Again, this is something that you can find online. You can use a pencil, you can use a marking knife, whatever works for you. What is really important here, however, is to keep in mind that there's this rotating action that has to happen when cutting the pins. The idea being that we need to check the end of the board and make sure that everything lines up angle-wise. So you're going to make your cut, flip the board end for end. If you're cutting the same ones on the other side, make those cuts. Do that for all of your boards. And then you can also flip the jig around to get your other angle and then do the same thing there. Then you just clear out the waste and fit everything up. And with that done, the only thing remaining is to fit everything together and marvel at how, without a handsaw, you got everything done so much quicker.